to The Print. This is Nikhil Rampal, and you're watching Soft Cover. Around 3 years ago, when the pandemic struck India, confining a billion-plus population to their homes, work from home became the standard norm for those employed in the corporate sector of the country. How has this changed the great Indian corporate culture? What differences do we see in the corporate India of the past, present, and what can we draw for the future? How different is the corporate hustle in India compared to that of the world? All these questions find an answer in the book, The Company We Keep by Divya Khanna, who is a planner and business strategist, published by Penguin India, which we are digitally launching today. So first of all, congratulations, Divya, for this wonderful book.
Thank you so much, Nikhil.
The Company We Keep and the company that we have today. Let me begin my question here. My first question to you is, so you were researching on corporate culture in India, and the quantitative research was somehow ready by February of 2020. So how did COVID-19 change the trajectory of the numbers that you observed during the research?
Okay. So sorry, Nikhil, just one correction. This is not a quantitative research. It's a qualitative research.
Okay.
And yes, I did most of the field work just before, so in October, and the pandemic hit in February, and then March was when the lockdown started. So it was interesting because, before, when we were doing this, work from home was seen as a kind of a little bit of a perk, and very few companies offered it, and those that did were actually seen as little better employers, because when you work from home, there's a little bit flexibility in terms of, managing your time a little better and getting your personal work done at the same time as the company work. Also a little bit more relaxed in terms of dress and, the formality of work. But there were a few people who were worried about taking that perk because, like as I mentioned in the book, there is something like a flexibility stigma. So whatever policies and, kind of perks are available to the employees, senior people are more comfortable taking it, and the junior and mid-level people kind of hesitate to take it because it's seen as, kind of a lack of commitment, or, it's like seen as, you're not very serious about your career. So that was the situation before the pandemic. After the pandemic, of course, a lot of companies, a lot of people had to just scramble to kind of figure out work from home. There were a huge amount of technical issues. Suddenly everybody knew what work from home was. Everybody had an experience of it, and everybody had an opinion on it. And my sense is, throughout the pandemic, there were lots of pros and cons which people were talking about, So a lot of people were kind of happy to have a little bit more time with their children, with their pets, with their family. A lot of people were also very upset because now they couldn't escape the household chores. So even while they had work, they still had to kind of, pitch in and do stuff at home as well. And of course, we heard a lot about Zoom fatigue because there were so many meetings which were on the computer, and nobody really was used to, that kind of interaction. But what I found over time is that it didn't really affect people's working styles or commitments as much as it affected their perceptions of other people's working style. So it's like, bosses, while they themselves do enjoy the flexibility of work from home, they are kind of a little suspicious of employees, because if the employees goof up, it kind of shows up very badly on them. And that is the whole thing. The advantage for one person on work from home is, I get that flexibility. Yet, as a boss, that's something that I'm very hesitant to extend to my team, because what if they don't deliver?
All right. So this is how the corporate culture has changed, according to you, a little. So you also written a chapter on, as I read the book a little, so you've also written a chapter on the corporate caste system. Could you please elaborate on how it functions? How is it different from the social caste system that we already have?
The thing is that our socio-cultural caste system is actually quite inflexible in the sense that, what you're born with is very little leeway for moving up and down that. So any, change in lifestyle, change in status is not dependent on that, because if you are a Brahmin, then you stay a Brahmin, right? But what happens with the corporate caste system is it's a flexible hierarchy, and with your age, your stage, your experience, you do tend to move up over time. And, there are the rare cases where, you didn't get the promotion you deserved, or some of your peers moved ahead of you, or you shifted to another industry, and so you kind of had to start again. So that, flexibility in status is possible through the corporate corporate hierarchy, not through the social hierarchy.
And how does it function otherwise, the corporate caste system?
So I think in India, the way it functions is that, there is a lot of deference given to somebody who is senior, and there isn't a lot of respect given to somebody who's junior. So like one of my experts, Mr. Ashok Kapoor, has mentioned that, there is, people interact sometimes differently with their seniors and differently with their juniors. And therefore the perception of the person can differ depending on who you ask. So there is a little bit of that. And there is also this thing of, everybody talks about managing the boss. That seems to be the most important thing, that, you have to understand how your boss functions and works and kind of stay on his or her good side. And that seems to be a very, very critical priority for most people, because that's seen as a direct reflection of, how their career will go.
Okay. So there is this story that I did long back when research showed that pre-industrialization 19th century workers usually work from home, and then years of organizational development made it possible to place workers under one roof. Now, as the pandemic has almost receded, do you think that the work from home culture could go on forever?
So I don't know about forever, but certainly a lot of companies are talking about hybridization, where for some functions, work from home may work out better. For some functions, you need to be in the office. So that discussion is happening. I don't know exactly how it's going to shape up. But what is very interesting is that, the gig economy, which had started even before the pandemic, but even now, I think lots of people are now seeing that, maybe if I can work flexibly and I can work from home. So a lot of younger people, especially, they went back to their hometowns from the expensive cities they were living in. They saved money on rent. They had a little better quality of life. They realized that, that being close to family and friends and community was important to them, and so there are people who kind of want to find opportunities where they can work from home, because then they can stay where they want. In advertising itself, we have a lot of people who work out of Goa, because they are freelancers, and, the projects come to them online, and they are very comfortable working that way. Internationally, there's always been this thing of the global nomads, so these are the young people who are like, freelance designers and things like that, who kind of travel the world while they're working, because all their projects basically require technology and a good internet connection. So that there is that trend also. And certainly I am a part of it, because I would also like to continue working freelance. I do like that flexibility. And, for some people, maybe just sitting in the office the whole day could be a little boring, unless, of course, there's a lot of interaction. So there are some job functions which require a lot of interaction. So it's interesting. We'll see going forward, depending on, how the companies draft their policies, and therefore how the potential workforce is kind of, making their choices.
So if I had to ask you to rate basically Indian corporate culture, how do you place it on, or the working attitude of an Indian worker, to say compared with a developed country like the US or Japan? How the corporate culture is different in India?
So actually, let me first put a qualifier. I have not really studied the work culture in the US or Japan. What I know is what any other layperson would know from reading articles and, a little bit of, cultural study that we do. But that's all I know. So I can't really talk with too much authority. But going by the Indian learnings that I have, work is a very, very important part of our life and our identity. We have this whole thing of, work being worship. So to not work is a really bad thing, and especially for men. A woman can have 100 other excuses. I'm having a baby, I'm looking after the house, I'm looking after older people. All of those are very valid reasons for not working. But for a man, it's still relatively important that they have a job and that they have a career. And a lot of women also are now judging themselves that way. So, it's culturally, it's a little frowned upon to be vela. Nobody wants to be sitting at home and doing nothing. Even the retired cohort these days, and, my father's a great example of this. He is probably busier than I am, and he has retired 3 times.
Okay.
So he has had 3 official retirements, and he's still working, and he's still keeping busy and traveling and, having lots of meetings through the day. So, we like to keep busy and we feel work is an important part for us. So there is a little, I would say a lot of seriousness with the way we approach work. I have heard that both the US and Japan are also countries where people work a lot of hours and they work a lot. And, in Japan, you hear stories of people die, falling down with exhaustion on the way.
Yes.
So I don't know if we are as bad as that, but certainly work is very important in our lives.
So why do you think that young Indians in the corporate sector find it difficult to say no to their supervisors when they ask them to work during off work hours? Is that also coming from the fact that we value work too much?
I think it's partly that, but it's also partly the hierarchy. We want our boss to think well of us, and we're very worried about giving the boss a bad impression. And that said, there are a lot of youngsters who are able to assert themselves and say, sorry, it's the weekend, and sorry, I can't do this. But largely, there is this kind of little bit of pressure that I want to show I'm serious. I want, for us, we are very ambitious. So we want to keep moving ahead. In India, you don't find the thing which you find sometimes in maybe the US or in other countries where, somebody's content to start a job and then be at that job for the rest of their lives. You work in a factory and you stay in the factory and you do the same job. That's not something which is really acceptable to us because we want to be upwardly mobile all the time. So since we're always looking for advancement, it's very important for us that the boss, who is basically the gatekeeper for our advancement, thinks well of us. So and also the thing is that the kind of training we have, like if you go to a management institute or an engineering institute, you'll find the library and computer centers are open all hours. You'll find people working in the middle of the night. So that kind of culture is kind of drilled into us very early. Even the ads where you show children studying for the exams, it's always late in the night or early in the morning they're getting up and they're studying, right?
Yes.
So somewhere that whole it's a really an intrinsic part of our culture. It feels really stupid to say, yeah, the boss is telling me to stay 2 more hours and I don't want to. That's a given. But if I don't stay those 2 hours, how can I do that? How can I, let my boss down? How can I let my work down?
All right. So, is there something that you would like to recommend a young person entering the corporate world? Like, this is one of the final questions, but you can recommend, you can list out multiple recommendations for somebody who is trying to enter the Indian corporate culture, apart from recommending your book, of course. So what are the recommendations that you would give to a young person entering the India's corporate scene?
So what I would tell a young person is that, be very clear about your choices, because, you won't get everything right off the bat, so, and, so what is it that's important to you, and then work towards that. And also, as you're working, don't just blindly follow a template. It's very, I think, that was probably my problem as well. And a lot of us, we tend to, you looking for a guru or a mentor or, role model, and they did these things, so I have to do these things. We're looking for like kind of a path drawn for us, and then we're just blindly following it. But what happens is that over time, your goals change, your needs change, your priorities keep differing, your personal life changes, and those pressures also come in. So, be constantly evaluative, constantly reflecting on, whether your choices are working out for you or not, and, in the moment, it's very easy to say this is more important than that. But going forward in the long term, we don't know where that's going to take us, So it's always about trying to find a balance. Work is very important and personal life is also very important. Health is also very important. So how do I kind of manage all of that without kind of draining, one area of my life to completely serve the other?
And what about women workers, especially because as I also read the book, it's also that women find fewer places at the top in the corporate sector in India. So, what's the way out? How can more women lead to that path?
So actually, I feel that there was a very interesting finding for me, because as a woman who's completely on the career path and everything, I always heard of this glass ceiling, and I said, oh my God, we have to crack that. But as I was doing the research, I also found that it wasn't so much about women not being promoted or not being given the opportunity. It's also about about women making their own choices. So when you have children, that is a priority. And at that point, if work becomes too demanding, so there's a lot of stories of women who might be in a very demanding career, But when they start planning a family, they start to kind of pivot into industries where the work may not be that demanding, because they're kind of already planning for the time when, they will have other demands on their time. And a lot of women also, like, for example, if you don't have childcare at home, if you don't have somebody reliable with whom you can leave your child, and at the same time there is pressure at work to kind of show that you're delivering. Yeah, so I think what happens is, at one point there is a slight discrimination at the workplace where, even I was told at one time when I was hiring somebody that you can't, that you should hire a man, don't hire a woman, because, late night deliveries and all of that will be a problem with a woman. And I remember that time I was very young and naive, and I felt very resentful about that, because I always felt I never said no, and I always did whatever, whatever needed to be done. And I didn't really make excuses and say, I can't go late at night, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. Yeah. But at the same time, there are, there are those issues, they are real issues. And also at the same time, sometimes we hear this, so I've also heard this, it's never really been confirmed that, a man in my job would get more salary than me,
And pay disparities are there.
Not so much amount of money, is that perception of fair. Yes. So if you feel you're not being treated fairly at work, and you're struggling to kind of, fulfill your responsibilities at home, it becomes a little easier decision to say, okay, I'm going to prioritize home, because what are the returns I'm getting for my sacrifice? When a woman is at home and she's taking care of her children and there are which, even if she's not getting, extrinsic validation, there's a lot of intrinsic satisfaction. Whereas at work, it can't always be intrinsic. It can't always be about, what I want. There are these indicators to the rest of the world on how well I'm doing. And those indicators have to be the promotions and the, the salaries and all of that.
So what do you think is the way out? Like, how do we reduce these questions or fears that women have when they want to climb the ladder in this corporate hierarchy?
I think, this is not something which is up to the women themselves. I think today a lot of companies are also looking for diversity. It's a very well-documented fact in the West, which now I think a lot of Indian corporates are also accepting, that diversity of thinking, diversity of people always kind of, leads to better business outcomes. So if, that is the case and they are really interested, I think what they need to do is, kind of, when you're reimagining work, whether it's a hybrid workplace or whether it's more work at home opportunities, these are things which both men and women want. I don't see, while it's, we talk about the glass ceiling at work, there was also a glass ceiling at home, where during the pandemic, a lot of men got to reconnect with their children and they enjoyed that, whereas what happens is that, with men, there's always this thing, why do you need to go home? Why do you need to, be at home if your in-laws are coming? Why do you need to kind of, pick up your child from school? And I think men would also like to do those things. I think today's men and women both are kind of looking for similar things. I don't think they're looking for really different things, So, while women want the work opportunities and the promotion and the advancement, men also want that feeling of being wanted at home and being with that closeness with their children and their families. So, when we redesign work, we have to find a way that it's something that is catering to both genders rather than only trying to favor one. Because I think that is what is leading to a lot of issues, right? Because when you have women-friendly policies, there are a lot of men who start feeling resentful of them.
All right, I think that brings us towards the end of this conversation. Thank you so much, Divya, for this thoughtful conversation. It was really intriguing to understand India's corporate culture and the latter part that we discussed on bringing more women at the top. I wish you the very best for this wonderful book. For more such interesting conversation on books, stay tuned to ThePrint.in.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. I really enjoyed this interaction.
Thank you so much, and wish you the very best for this book.